Hi, good morning. It's always great to be in conversation with Amish. And backstage, we figured that we were in conversation with each other. I was under the impression we have somebody in conversation with us. So
It'll be fun.
it'll be fun. So Amish, straight off, foreign language is it, our cup of tea. So is English the language that you write in? Is it a foreign language?
I think it's a foreign language that we have made our own, right? There is a version of English called Indian English. Okay, like we are like that only. It's only in Indian English that we say that standing, standing. I told him. So I think that language is ours, man. And it may have been invented in. Actually, English began as a guttural German dialect, and then it went to England. May have been invented there, but Indian English we made our own. As of now, that is an Indian language. Having said that, I always say, we must not forget, and English is the language to get a good job in, but we must not forget our own Matrubhasha, our own mother tongue as well, which for me is Hindi, for you is Bengali, and for all of you it could be different languages. We must honor our own mother tongue as well.
How do you think when you write? Do you think in Hindi or in English? What's your thinking process?
I have a khichdi, man, in my mind. So I guess like most Indians, it's a mix of Hindi and English. And the strange thing is like it changes seamlessly, okay? Like if I'm speaking to my parents or my elders, I speak in Shuddh Hindi. There's not one English word in it. But if I'm speaking to my kid sadly speaks Jet Airways Hindi. Wo wahan khada tha, karta hai types. So to him, I end up speaking more in English, yeah.
I don't know whether the audience knows, but in the next edition of the Oxford Dictionary, which will come out in 2035, 3,700 words are from what you're saying, English.
From our languages, yeah.
From very much our language.
We should colonize English and tell the British that now it's not your language anymore, it's our language.
I think the Americans have already done that. They've told the British that it's not their language, but it's Americanism. Amish, one of the problems when you write, and I'm sure you've encountered it, the nuance that you have, say, in a Hindi or an Urdu or a Bengali or a Bhojpuri or a Marathi, how does that get translated? Because English doesn't necessarily have all the vocabulary or all the understanding of, say, a Naka in Hindi or Nautanki, etc. So how do you translate that, especially in the kind of novels that you have written?
Yeah, it is a problem. You're right. English it's not a very logical language, right? That many of us find it, because most of us would know English here, we are used to the concept of words not being spelt the way they are pronounced, which in a scientific language is ridiculous. But in Hindi, Bengali, it's not that way. It's written the way it's pronounced. And there are many untranslatables as well. Dharma is an untranslatable. In English, the term for our ancient stories is mythology. But that's not the term we use in Hindi or in Indian languages. We'll say Pauranik Katha or we'll say Itihasa. I try my best to use Indian words where possible, but I use English words as well, like, just use a khichdi, yeah, as long as it's intelligible.
For a very long time, the other national languages or writers in the other national languages outsold 3:1 any writing in English. It's only, I think, when Arundhati Roy's first blockbuster and then Salman Rushdie and Vikram Seth, and more recently people like you who've sold in millions. What has been the progression, and have you seen that sort of now come to find its own writing in English?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I don't know how many have read my books out here. How many
have read his books? That's terrible.
That's terrible. Shame on the rest of you guys. Yeah?
I mean,
yeah.
you have many more. I'm joking. You have many more millions
but the books
to sell.
Are available.
So that's
books are available.
Thing.
Do check them out. Shameless plugging. Yeah, I think. Look, what used to happen earlier is the publishing industry in India, was more of a British industry, which just happened to be based in India. The subjects were not Indian. What's happened over the last 10-15 years is the subjects that are picked on is Indian. So that obviously, then many more Indians can connect to it. So that makes a big difference.
Your very first trilogy, which was the Shiva trilogy, where you made Shiva not so much the god that he's now considered to be, but very much a human who had come down from a mountainous region. How did the idea come to you? And how did you then transcribe it and create it into this trilogy? Was it all together? I mean, did you have the whole plot laid out there, or was it something that as you started writing it evolved?
First of all, I should clarify, in the Indian way, it's not, there are various concepts of God. So it's not that Lord Shiva is not a God in the Shiva trilogy. One of the things in the Indian way is that all of us have a God within. And the ones we respect as gods are the ones who've discovered the God within. Everyone knows what this is. What's it called? Namaste? Anyone knows the meaning of the strict meaning of the word Namaste? Anyone
Anybody
wants
knows
to
the meaning of the
shout
word?
out the
There's
answer?
somebody at the back.
Yes,
Go
back
ahead.
there. Namaste. Okay, applause for her. She's right. Namaste is actually a Sanskrit word, and it's a conjoint of two different words. Namaste. It means I bow to the divine within you. And this is, in a way, a humble greeting. When I'm saying Namaste, I'm acknowledging that there's a God within you. But in a way, it's also a challenge. I'm challenging you to discover the God within you. Yeah? And this is the beauty of the Indian way. And that's the way it is in my Shiva trilogy and Ramchandra series as well. That the ones we idolize as gods are the brilliant men and women who discovered the God within and hence became godlike. So they are like role models for us, that we can become that too if we can get inspired by them. That's the belief in it, and that's what I was trying to convey through these books. There are various philosophies as well that I try and convey, and one can read them as action adventures and have fun while reading it. But I think there's a lot of wisdom, a lot of beautiful, poetic, liberal, modern, almost modern wisdom in our ancient stories, and I'm trying to convey them in a modern way, in a modern idiom.
In many ways, the Shiva trilogy was very much an Indian Lord of the Rings because it had everything. It's set in this magnificent backdrop of ancient India, and everything from Varanasi all the way up to the mountains and all the way down south. When you play this out, your reference material is what? I mean, where did you get your reference material to be able to set this new story or the telling of a story in a particularly new way?
I get many, much of the inspiration is from the text itself. So, among the Mahapurans, many are Shaivite Puranas like the Skanda Puran, Linga Puran, etc. So I've read many of them. Those come as interpretations. It's mixed with my imagination as well and actual historical stuff as well. So Melua is my imagination of what Indus Valley civilization would have been like. So that part is historically accurate. Flow of the Saraswati, descriptions of the cities, and much of the inspiration comes from the Shaivite Puranas mixed with my imagination. So it's like a mixture, masala, khichdi of these three things.
In fact, even in the telling of the story of the Saraswati, of the river Saraswati, you made it much more an ecological story. Can you, because many people haven't read your book, can you just briefly talk about
the Saraswati
river and the way that you've shown how the water is being used to make the immortal Amrit of life,
cool.
And therefore it disappears.
One is there is, many modern Indians, we think the Saraswati river was mythical, that it wasn't real, that it's an imaginary or perhaps an underground river which meets Yamunaji and Gangaji at Allahabad, at Prayag. But there is modern research that's showing that probably it may have been a real river.
Well, the satellite imagery of recent times have shown that the Saraswati river did exist and the root of it.
Yeah, that it actually existed. Like how many are from Rajasthan out here? Anyone from Rajasthan? You heard of the Ghaggar river in Rajasthan? It's a seasonal river in Rajasthan, but it's actually a very minor river. But the riverbed is too broad for such a minor river. It's not logical. So there is modern research that's showing that perhaps that is the ancient ancient riverbed of the Saraswati ji, which dried up, and now Ghaggar flows in that same riverbed. So this is actually scientific research that's happening. And the Saraswati river used to be formed by the merger of Sutlej and Yamunaji. And Yamunaji went to join Gangaji, and Sutlej went to join Indus. So in effect, that actually just in a way almost beheaded Saraswati ji. It just dried up. This is the actual scientific basis. And, there's, in the Vedas, there is this reference always to this magical drink called somras, okay, which Indra says that I've had somras, so I am unstoppable now. No one can defeat me. And some of the British translators they said that perhaps somras was like a drink, a wine or an intoxicant, but I'm saying, because they said that, if someone like Varun says that I've had somras, now I can live for, forever. Now I am immortal. So the British interpretation was, obviously it must be an intoxicant because he's saying nonsense. But I'm saying, what if we believe that they were actually speaking the truth? Okay, that this is actually, an anti-aging drink. It's like an Amrit, which kind of increases their lifespan dramatically. So what could be true for that? And I assume that to be true. And the Saraswati waters are a part of the mixture which goes into creating the somras, which is an anti-aging drink. That's what's there in my books.
But the dichotomy in the book where you kill the river or you use the water to be able to create this mixture that will bring you eternity, I mean, is that dichotomy that we see even today where we're using our natural resources in many ways to further our own personal ambitions or the ambitions of our people and yet killing our planet as we do it? Is that the kind of reference that you sort of brought through this particular telling of the tale?
That is particularly what I want to bring across, that in our way, in the modern way, we speak of environmentalism like, it's something where humanity has to save the environment, which is such an arrogant way of looking at it. Our ancestors didn't look at it that way. I mean, the environment is like the mother. You try and help the environment in your own interest because you have to survive. If we push the environment too much, all that will happen is that humanity will get wiped out, nature will survive, Mother Nature will survive. And in a way, that's what happened in Meluha, that excess use of the somras, because who doesn't want to be immortal, led to the slow killing of the Saraswati Ji river, right? And in today's day, for example, excess use of oil, which is the source of cheap energy for all of us, has created a great lifestyle. But excess use of oil is creating tremendous environmental damage. Excess use of red meat is creating tremendous environmental damage. And red meat may have been useful 100 years ago when humanity did a lot of physical hard work. Today, most of us just sit around, man. We are working on, computers most of the time. We don't need the level of calories that red meat gives. And there was this Oxford study which had showed that if you stop the entire red meat industry across the world, you will stop release of more greenhouse gases. Matlab, it'll be better for the environment than if you removed all the cars, buses, and trucks in the world. Can you imagine? That's the impact of the red meat industry. Oil and red meat, these two industries are causing tremendous environmental damage. Fossil fuels, essentially. Coal, oil, and red meat. And in our own interest, we need to cut it down in our own interest. If we destroy the environment, we will get destroyed.
Much of your work, in fact, all three of your trilogies, etc., and your contemporary non-fiction work, has talked about, in a sense, revisiting our heritage and our ancient scriptures and our philosophy, and making that the purpose or the way of dharma, lack of a better word. Can you tell us a little bit about your philosophy and how you arrived at this particular thing? Because I think you represent many of the young people here, which is the young India or the young India narrative. But the young India narrative has to some extent been captured by the imagination of the West, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Hollywood, Bollywood, etc. So how do we revisit it, and what is this ancient scripture which all of us tend to foo-foo rather than actually consider deep diving into?
I feel very strongly about this here because our education system is such that the more educated we become, the more westernized we become. It's almost been designed that way. So we don't learn enough of our own culture. Like there are so many Indians who believe that, for example, fighting for women's rights is apparently some westernized thing to do, which is utter nonsense actually, because our ancestors treated men and women as equals. What is the oldest scripture for Indians? Anyone wants to take a guess? Oldest
The
scripture.
oldest scripture,
Vedas? Yeah,
Upanishad.
Upanishads are essentially the Vedanta, but they're part of the Vedas. So our oldest scripture are the Vedas. Okay, and the oldest one among them is the Rig Veda. There are idiots today who say women shouldn't read the scriptures at particular times. There are hymns in the Rig Veda written by women rishis, by rishikas. Okay, that was the way India was in those days. You know, idiots who say women shouldn't read the scriptures, they used to write the scriptures 5,000, 10,000 years ago. There are so many people who believe today that the British created our country. You know, that India was created by the British. How many people believe that? That the British created
The
India?
idea of India was
Idea of
created
India?
by the British.
No one here. Arey, I'm so delighted. Fantastic. There are many people who actually believe that because it's taught to us in our education. You know, that the concept of India didn't exist before the British came, which is not true. You know, the Vishnu Puran, for example, which was certainly not created by the British, says Uttaram tat samudrasya himadrashchaiva dakshinam varsham tad bharatam nama bharati yatra santatihi. That north of the ocean and south of the Himalayas, the nation that exists there is called Bharat, India. And the people who live there are the descendants of Bharat. The concept of India did exist. The British didn't create the concept of India. Our ancestors created the concept of India. How many are maths graduates out here? How many have studied maths? Maths, mathematics. Okay.
Few.
Everyone who studied mathematics has heard of Pythagoras. Anyone who's not heard of Pythagoras? You haven't heard of Pythagoras? Okay. Okay. Of the people who said that they have heard of Pythagoras, how many have heard of Bhaskaracharya? Fantastic. I love this audience, man. Because normally when I ask this, most people have not heard of Bhaskaracharya. How many have heard of Bodhayana? 3, 4. That's a little sad. 5. Bodhayana is the one who actually discovered Pythagoras' theorem before Pythagoras did. He'd written it in the Shulba Sutra 800 years ago, but 200 years before Pythagoras. It's 800 BC. But this is not taught to us. Many of these things should be taught so that actually we can gain some pride in our own way and learn that being liberal is not some westernized, conspiracy against India. It is the Indian way. Respecting women's rights, respecting LGBT rights is actually the Indian way. It is the way our ancestors were.
You know, I'm conscious of the time. We have 2.5 minutes left. I'm going to quickly just fast forward, skip for a second the Sita trilogy and come to your more recent work, which is Ravan. You've begun writing your trilogy on Ravan. Can you tell us, in your sense, what was Ravan's essence? Was it his dark side which dominated? Was he a person with, Mahabuddhi or 10 heads? How have you rediscovered the telling of this very ancient, perhaps North Indian versus South Indian text?
No, actually, for most urban Indians, our concept of Ravan is based on a 1980s television serial, which showed him as a very simplistic person. But the original Valmiki Ramayana had a very nuanced take on Ravan. And that's the way our ancestors were across. So it's not just a north-south thing, it's more a ancient and modern thing. And the way to look at Ravan was he was brilliantly capable, he was a brilliant intellectual, a brilliant warrior, but his problem was his ego. And the lesson to learn from him is no matter how capable you are, if you can't control your ego, you'll have some problems in life.
So primarily ego?
Ego.
Is that
That
the
is-
story is about ego?
No, it's about his talents as well. So he was brilliantly talented. But I'm saying one of the lessons to learn from Ravan is no matter how talented you are, if you cannot control your ego, you'll have problems.
For those of you who haven't read the Shiva trilogy, please go out and do so. It's one of the most brilliant books. It's exciting, it's got war, it's got all kinds of escapades that our young heroes in there sort of manage. Before we end, we are sitting at a conference for Tomorrow's India. Let's start with I. Any specific message that you have for young people that will sort of ground them and give them an insight into where they should go to discover their inner potential?
I'm no one to be giving a message, but I love this line. Let's start with I. One of the problems in mainstream media and social media is this almost constant whining and complaining. You know, that someone else has to do this, falana ne ye nahi kiya, usne ye nahi kiya. That never solved the problem. Whiners and complainers never solve the problem. We have to take charge ourselves. If we want to, like Mahatma Gandhi said, we have to be the change we want to see. You know, so if I have to say one thing, it should be that all of us should take charge and improve India where we can in our corner of the world. That's the way I see it.
So we should take charge, we should improve India where we can in our corner of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, Amish Tripathi, thank you so much.